Good night, everyone. Johnson. I got this good and God is good all the time. My name is Irma J. Spirit Divine. I'm here to give you a word on tonight, and we still doing Bible study. Um, we had the law of covenant with Abraham. Now, this story is after where Abraham rescued his nephew Lot. He rescued his nephew Lot. Excuse me. So this story gonna be about God made a covenant with Abraham, and God promised a great blessing to Abraham and his family. Now these blessings which extended um, to all Abraham offspring. You, you know, God had chosen the Israelite due to Abraham. Now the first covenant God had made with Abraham was the promise of the land. No. First, he blessed Abraham. He said, I'm going to bless you, and you're going to be a blessing to all. Anybody that's around you going to be blessed. And then God made a covenant with him that he going to made a promise to him that he going to inherit the Canaanites land. So the package going to come from Genesis chapter 15, verse 1 through 21. So we just talk about Abraham rescue his nephew Lot. So now we talking about God came to Abraham in a vision. You know, um, I am. So when God came to Abraham in his vision, he told Abraham, don't be afraid. This me. I'm your shield. You know, I'm your very great rewarder. Now, God is our rewarder. God bless us. So God is our rewarder. He reward us. He bless us. So God came in a vision. And God told Abraham, don't be afraid. I am your shield and your great reward. Now Abraham said, Lord, what can you give me? Cause he a little rowdy right now because him and his wife is childless right now. So God telling him about this blessing and telling him about he giving him this land. God giving him saying all kind of good things to Abraham. But Abraham like, well, what can you give me? You telling me about the blessing, you telling me about the land, but my wife and I are childless. So since I remain childless and the ones, who will inherit, now Abraham learned about who gonna inherit his stuff, because his wife and him is childless. Now he's saying he thinking his servant in his household gonna inherit his estate. So that's what you're telling God. What can you do for me? It's my servant is gonna inherit everything that I have because I don't have no children. You know. So Abraham saying, okay, you bless me, great reward. But I have no children. So Abraham like all this stuff sound good, but I have no children. Abraham learned about who would inherit his estate. So Abraham said, but they remain childless. Abraham telling God, what can you do for me? You know. So then the word of the Lord came to him. You know, God said, your servant will not be your heir. You know, God had told him, your son, who is your own flesh and blood, will be the heir of your estate. Now God took him outside. God took him outside and said, look up, look up and count the stars. If you can count the stars, that means you can count how many offspring that you're gonna have. So indeed you can count them, so your offspring will be. So he's saying that he will have some offspring because he gonna have Isaac. Isaac, gonna have the two twins, Esau and Jacob. And they gonna create a Esau and Jacob supposed to be the nation, but Jacob children will be the nation. Esau, we didn't hear too much about Esau no more. So after God telling him everything, Abraham believed what the law say and credit it to him as a righteous person. You know, so God had told him, God said, your servant will not be your heir. You know, your son, your own flesh and blood will be your heir. So he let him know Sarah gonna have a baby. You know, but then a long time gonna pass and Sarah gonna try to take it into her own hands. You know, and she just gonna make things worse because her and the woman gonna be bigger. You know, and you know, so God had told him, you will have a child, you know, will be your own flesh and blood, will be the heir of your estate. You know, so God answered that question, you know, and so God said, I am your reward. You know, so this land, to take possession of it, you know, Abraham said, Lord, how can I know that I will gain possession of it? You know, now see Abraham, you know, he asking a lot of questions. Now Abraham used to don't answer a lot of questions, but he asking a lot of questions right now. So Lord said, bring me a heifer, you know, a goat, a ram, each of them. Make sure they're 3 years old. You know, Abraham did what God had instructed him to do, and Abraham fell into a deep sleep, and a thick draft of darkness came over him. You know, and God answered Abraham. Now he taught his servant, you know, he thought his servant was gonna be the heir. You know, so God had said, oh no, your own flesh and blood, your own son, you know, gonna be your heir, not your servant. You know, and so now Abraham is in a deep sleep, and God is about to tell him about his plan. You know, so God's plan is already mapped out so perfectly. You know, and we all know how it all end out, and it end out just like God plan is. You know, that's something. He's a good writer. He writes something out, and everything fall right in place just how he write it. You know, and God always, you know, I mean, every little detail is just like he written out. You know, so this is God plan. He telling it to Abraham. Why Abraham in a deep sleep. You know, the law said, you know for certain. Now God said, know for certain, you know, that 400 years, and you know it took 430 years for him to save the Israelite. He said 400 years, your deceiving will be strangers in a country, not their own, you know, but they will be enslaved and mistreated there. But I will punish the nation, you know, that they serve as slaves. And afterwards, they will come out with great possession. You know, everything he just said, it all had came to pass. You know, so he said 400, but it took 430 years. He came and saved them, you know, and stretched out his mighty hand. They was in a strange country, you know, they was in Egypt, you know, and he said there was slaves and mistreated. There was slaves under Pharaoh, and they was being mistreated with Pharaoh men. You know, so all this that he written, it did came to pass. And he said he would punish the nation, you know, so he did put Pharaoh, all Pharaoh men under that Red Sea, you know, and they did not see him no more, you know. So afterwards, they came out with great possession. They came out with a land with milk and honey. God had blessed them, you know, they ain't needed for nothing. You know, so they came out with great possession. You know, so this is his plan mapped out, and it all came to pass just like he said. You know, so God also have Abraham, or he also had Abraham old age in place in his plan. Abraham will go to his ancestors in peace and be buried as a good old age. You know, so he gonna live a full life. You know, and in the fourth generation, your deceiving will come back here. And that this was the Israelite did. Once they was living in, Jacob and them were living in that land. But then God had them to get sent to Egypt. And they had to be there, you know, as a slave. And after 430 years, God had delivered them out of being slavery. and brought them back to their land. You know, Canaanites brought them back to their own land that God was giving them, even though they already were staying in it. But then God had to go through the procedure of His plan and send them to Egypt as a slave, and then Jacob had to multiply as a great nation. So God also had Abraham old age in place. Abraham will go to his ancestor in peace and be buried as a good old age. In the fourth generation, uh, your deceiver will come back here for the sin of the Ammonites that had not yet reached its fullest measure. You know, so his plan came to pass. Now we see that God's plan was written long before it came to pass. You know, it was like soon after the creation. We on page. I'm on page 16. You know, so just way at the beginning of His creation that He wrote this plan out. You know, but we see it didn't come to pass to Exodus. I think that's when they tore the wall down for that their life. You know, and so many people was involved, like Moses. You know, he had Moses as a child. He had a purpose for Moses to deliver the Israelite out of slavery. You know, he had Abraham was going to do it, but Abraham got old, so he put Abraham in his plan as an old person that will die and be buried as a good righteous person. You know, so we see that God's plan was written a long time before it came to pass. God took 400 years to save the Israelite, just like His plan said. We're gonna be 400 years, you know. So there was in a strange country. You know, He said it was in a strange country. There was in Egypt under Pharaoh. That was a strange company. You know, that was what his brother Joseph was at. They didn't know nothing about that. All they know when they was in their land was in famine, they told them to go to Egypt. You know, so they was in a strange country and wind up got stuck there as a slave. You know, so yes, the Israelite was slaves under Pharaoh, and his men did mistreated them, and God did punish them by putting them under the Red Sea. You know, so there was a slave, you know, and it was getting mistreated, you know, and God, when they came out, you know, by they was being mistreated under Pharaoh men, God did. That's why God came up with that plan to have them to follow them to the Red Sea. God, that was all God planned to halt and Pharaoh halt, to follow the Israelite to the Red Sea. Because God know He was gonna punish them from mistreating the Israelite and put them under that Red Sea. You know, because Israel was afraid when they escape and they turn around, they're seeing Pharaoh and his men behind them. You know, so God like, don't worry, I got y'all back. You know, that was all in God's plan. Then I'm about to put them under this Red Sea. You know, so with excuse me, with God's mighty hand, they came out. God had to keep on telling them, you know, you came out with God's mighty hand. God's mighty hand brought y'all out of slavery. You know, so with a great, yeah, they had great possession. They had the land that was blessed. They had need for nothing. The land was milk and honey. You know, so they had food every day. You know, so Abraham did. You know, um, Abraham age was in God's plan to be buried. You know, so God knew he was, you know, getting at that little age. Now that he wasn't even gonna be around to even see his uh offspring, you know, generation after generation. They had so many generation after generation. You know, it just kept going on and on because the Israelites just kept on growing. You know, because God told them to multiply, and they did just what God told them to do. That was multiplying. You know, so the Israelites did possess their land in Canaan. They did possess it. It took them 40 years, but they did possess their land. Now, when the sun had set and darkness had fallen, you know, a smoking fire pot with a blazing torch appeared and passes between the pieces. You know, so on that day, The Lord made a covenant on that day when all that stuff happened, with the sun had set and the darkness had fallen. Uh, God said on that day, the Lord made. That's when the Lord made a covenant with Abraham. And God said to your offspring, I will give this land, to your offspring. This land gonna be for your offspring. Because see, Abraham not gonna be around. He said this land gonna be for your offspring. So God had made a covenant with Abraham. And God gonna stick with that covenant while Abraham alive and while he gone. God gonna be very faithful to this covenant that he been making with Abraham. So one, God had blessed Abraham first. He made a promise to Abraham that he gonna bless him and he gonna be a blessing. He gonna be a blessing to the whole nation. Everyone around him gonna be blessed. That was the first covenant that he made with them. With Abraham, and then the second covenant that he made with Abraham was the land. I'm gonna give this land to you and your offspring. So first the covenant promised the land. And then God said, and so Abraham and his wife is childless, don't have no children. And that's what, God, Abraham telling God, you blessing me, you giving me this, you giving me that, but else can you give me right now? I understand you said you're gonna bless me, but my wife don't have no child, don't have no children right now. So God told him that Sarah will have a child. She will have a child, because, she's supposed to be the mother of the nation. And she can't be a mother of the nation with no children. So God said, count the stars in the sky. And we cannot count the stars in the sky. We cannot count the stars in the sky. So that means that's how many offspring that they're going to have. They're just going to have that one child, but their offspring is going to be so big that you can't even count them. Just like you cannot count the stars, you will not count the Israelite, because that's why the new king in Egypt, that's why they had got scared of the Israelite. That's why they wanted to kill all the boys, because they was growing so rapidly, and they got scared that they were gonna turn on them. That's why they wanted to get rid of all the boys, because the Israelite, they were just growing, multiplying as a great nation. So Abraham heir, he thought his servants were gonna be his heir. He worrying about, well, who gonna possess my stuff? Who gonna inherit my stuff? We don't have no children. My servants gonna get everything that's in my household. So he said everybody in his household will gonna receive everything in his inheritance. But God came and said no. God said no. You're gonna have your own child, your own son, your own flesh and blood who gonna be your heir. Not your servants, not nobody in your household, but your own flesh and blood son will be inheriting your stuff. So God told Abraham his plan, what would happen with his offspring. The Israelites, his offspring that come from Jacob. And Esau's supposed to be a nation too. Both of them supposed to come together as a nation. But them two start fighting and he's stealing stuff from each other, so that didn't even work out. But Jacob children brought it to the finish line. You know, uh, so we see that God made promises in a covenant with Abraham. He said, "I'm gonna bless you, and you will be a blessing." And then the second covenant he made with Abraham, that I promise you this land to you and your offspring. So while Abraham was living in Canaanites. He was living there. And he said your offspring gonna be living here also, but they're gonna have to leave and go to a strange country. And they got to stay there as being as slaves. They will get mistreated. But then they're gonna come back. And see that's what God was telling Abraham. They're living. Jacob was living in Canaan. And that's when he found out Joseph was in Egypt. and he was dying. So then, God had told him that a long time ago when God met up with Jacob. Okay, the land that you standing on, you're gonna have to leave this land and then come back. But he didn't do as God said. So God had to put the dream in Joseph, to get the plan started. See when God write a plan out, God want meant. He wanted us to be played out. So Jacob fooled around and got old, so God had to put the vision and the dream in Joseph to get it started. Sometimes you're gonna fall in the pit to get to what God trying to get you to. But God gonna save you. But you gotta go through a little something to get what He trying to take you to. Joseph had to go through something. But before he would be a king or ruler. See, God ain't gonna let you just jump and just be a queen and a king. You got to still work for. You got to still see trouble and still see trials. Joseph saw all that before he became to be the ruler over Egypt. You know, look at all that Job went through. Job went through so much, but then after he was blessed. He was blessed over blessing. You know, but we see that God stuck with his plan. He blessed Abraham. Abraham didn't, enjoy it too long because he got old and he had died. But it passed on to Jacob and his family. The blessing went on. You know, and the land went on. So all this stuff came to pass. It took them 40 years to get to that promised land that God gave them, but they got to it. You know, and so God had, there were slaves. They was in a strange land. So everything God wrote, it all came to pass. So this the covenant. The name of the title is the Lord covenant with Abraham. So he made that covenant with Abraham, and that's when he first started explaining his plan to Abraham. You know, he first, he started telling, so this how all the plan is mapped out. And that's why we always read about the Israelite. The Israelite. I mean, I had to read the Bible about 2 years ago, not now, but years ago. I had to read the Bible like 2 times before I could get who is the Israelite, where they come from. So now I'm starting from the beginning to teach everybody. All that's gonna learn where all this stuff come from, where it started from. So that's all the word I have for you on tonight. Y'all have a blessed night, and I'll see y'all on the next video.